In this video, we're going to be taking an in-depth look at the Generation 3 Levo. I met up with Specialized's category lead for Turbo, David Alexander, and we get deep into the details. We're talking ride, geometry, tech, new Mastermind display, steps to beef up the waterproofing, and a load more. So whilst this bike looks similar to the old one, there's actually a ton of differences. Let's get stuck in and talk everything Gen 3 Levo.
It does look on the face of things, as you said, it's the Levo. Okay, so the good thing about that is it's very recognisable. You've got the DNA there of our premium trail e-bike, right? The Turbo Levo, it's the category leader. It is going to appeal to those people who already know and understand and love Levo, and then you're also going to see how much we've broadened its appeal to progressive riders, to maybe people who were doing stuff with their existing Levo, wanting to push it a bit further, do more with it. So there's so many things to touch on. Chassis as a bike first. We've been building bikes, right, for a long time, 40 years, 4 decades worth of trail bikes, from the original stump jumper. So this is going to take on all of that heritage. Some of the bikes that you can point to more recently, Enduro, Stump Jumper Evo, are again the kind of, I suppose, the leading lights in that trail and more aggressive Enduro style of riding. And that's where this is going to have some most obvious nods to. Clearly the layout is still very much as we know from current Levo and a Stumpy Evo, so sidearm frame design, but everything from the previous bike that really works well has been kept, and then we've adjusted, we've tweaked, we've improved a lot of areas that have added that capability for the new rider.
First up, big changes to the geometry. It's longer, slacker, and it's based around a more progressive suspension design.
Geometry was something we wanted to go after for the more progressive trail rider, but we didn't want to leave our existing Levo audience behind. It still wants to suit a lot of EMTBers who aren't going to be pushing it, but then also broaden its appeal to those who are pushing it, and that's where the geometry adjustment comes in. So headset cups give you some adjustment there. We'll talk about those in more depth. And then of course the horse link adjustment as well. The beauty of that now compared to what we've had in the past is that they're totally independent. So if you just want to do the head angle and then you just want to do bottom bracket height, whilst okay they're intrinsically going to affect each other, you can do them independently. Just tweak half a degree here on the head angle by changing the BB height, or do a full degree by changing the headset cups. And that just is going to allow the person who wants to push it more in certain terrains to have that ability, but also those who are traveling around different destinations, different terrain, their kind of rider preference, their style, it just opens it up to that capability a lot more.
On paper, the geometry chart is already a bit more progressive and slacker than the previous generation Levo.
Yeah.
But for those that want to make it even slacker, you can do that, or make it steeper and match the original kind of head angle of the previous generation Levo. And as an owner of the first gen and second gen and now riding this one, it feels pretty different. Even without that, the default geometry just seems like it's way more up to date, longer, slacker, lower than Specialized of previous style. There's six sizes, which is pretty incredible. So from, well, it's not even small, medium, large, it's S-base sizing, and I know you've done other bikes in S-base sizing, but what is that all about? What does it mean?
Style-specific sizing. It's where it's all come from. So we began this with our longest travel bikes, and it was all about the reach, that kind of roominess for the cockpit and the rider's preference. More than anything, more and more people looking to bikes which are longer in the front centre. The tallest of the tall will now be able to fit on something like an S6, and then our S1 sizing is almost equivalent to like an extra small of old, but the beauty of S sizing is it's more about that preference, that rider preference. Do they want it to be more manoeuvrable and therefore maybe a little bit shorter? Do they want it to be longer and more stable? So it's not just purely a height-based game anymore. It's down to their riding style.
The bike is designed to be more capable than ever, with its new Fox suspension and the mullet wheel set. And that 27-inch on the rear, with the shorter chainstay, help the bike tip in to the tight, twisty corners.
It's something that, as a mountain bike brand, for years we've always been quite keen on quite a low centre of gravity, so relatively low bottom bracket. Of course, as we've got to bikes with motors, they're doing some of the assistance for you, so you're less worried about longer crank arms and therefore, rock strikes and what have you. So we have been able to bring BBs down relative to the amount of travel that the bikes have. But making it lower centre of gravity, better in the corners. And then of course with this bike, we've made a significant adjustment to the rear end, tucking that rear wheel in a lot closer. We have a certain amount of space we can play with FSR and of course with the size of the motor. But within that space, we've really optimized it with the new bike, shortening down the chainstays, steepening the seat tube angle. We don't want to lose its capability as an all-day riding bike. We can go slacker, we can go longer, we can go lower. And that's great for a lot of riders, but some still, they're not going to be pushing it so much. They love the way that it climbs as well as the way it shreds. So we've wanted to keep its capability for going uphill, all-day riding capabilities, and then pointing it down.
I've changed the headset cup to the slack position, which is like 63.5 degrees. And I've just hit this trail and it feels super stable, and you can feel that it's like reduced the head angle, it's slacked it out quite a bit.
And that's exactly what we were talking about with sort of broadening its appeal. So just even doing that, which took like minutes, right? Hardly any time at all. And you've given the bike this extra dimension. And for you as a rider, for a lot of other riders out there, they'll appreciate that progression, particularly when you're doing some of the gnarlier stuff as well. The out-of-the-box setting, great, but you've got that opportunity to quickly change that, adjust and go, and really attack the trail.
Yeah, and I haven't gone to the low position on the bottom bracket, but that would take it down to 63 degrees. So it takes it down. Obviously, you're running a bit lower then, so maybe a bit more stable, less pedal clearance. But for going downhill, if you go into, I reckon if I was going to like Finale Ligure or the Alps, I would perhaps put it in the slack and low position for those just super stable downhill runs.
When you're not doing a ton of climbing, then turn it into a sled. That's what we're talking about. Get the center of gravity low, get that head angle whacked out there, long front center, short rear end, we know it's already got, but keep it ultra stable.
Fork, it's gone up to a 38, and the shock is an X2. Now, I've been a Levo owner a couple of times over. I've got the original one and the previous generation, the Gen 2, and that came with a 34 fork on. So we're
Back
on a 38, not long ago, like 2018. So not a huge amount of time ago.
Yeah, it's a conscious decision actually, Rob. Yeah, completely, and with the X2 on the back as well, it's a thought and it's a nod towards that progressive rider and giving the capability. So yes, it does add weight completely, and that's often like the downside of the full power bikes, is that they are heavier. But we started off, one of the things we were talking about was improving the handling, and we did a lot of that through the kinematics, so through that new axle path. And we've done a lot of it through the geometry, but actually the mulleting element, so the smaller rear wheel, that does shave some weight. So we've saved some weight there, we've got a shorter rear end, that also saves us some weight. But instead of trying to say, oh, well, we made the bike lighter, we can improve handling by making a bike lighter, we've got an entire family of SL bikes for just pure lightweight. So other ways of improving handling, wheels, geometry, chassis. So then if we've got a bit of almost like weight to play with, it's like, well, we're not trying to make it the super light bike. It's never been a heavyweight in its category, right? The Levo has always been pretty class leading when it comes to weight. So redeploy that weight with beefier suspension, both front and rear, more capable for the bigger stuff. You are going to be slackening things out. You are going to be taking it to more technical, aggressive terrain. The beefier and larger capable suspension will deal with it better. Suspension, more control, more confidence, more rad.
More fun.
More fun, yeah, get the fun.
The weight listed is 21.8 or something thereabouts. This is S5, so one of the bigger sizes. This was just over 22 tubeless. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much parity year on year.
Yeah.
So this is the thing. The expectation launching your bike, it's got to be lighter, stiffer, stronger. Now, those are the ones we always go after. But in this case, we've decided it's not about making it lighter. You know, we'll redeploy that weight, and in certain areas, certain parts of the bike are heavier, certain parts are lighter. So overall, we get the same kind of weight story, but in a package which will either appeal to the existing rider or for the person who wants to push their boundaries a bit more and needs the bike to support them there. That's now going to give that to them.
What I'm absolutely amazed at is that if you want to, you can make it slacker than a Kinevo. In the S6 size, it's actually longer than a Kinevo, so it's longer and slacker than a Kinevo if you want it to be.
If you want it to be, yeah. And again, you know, we look to some of our other products within the range. Some of the things we've learnt from Enduro, Stump Jumper Evo, I think it's like a really obvious touchstone for this bike because they're both a trail category, similar amounts of travel. So we've learned from what we've done there and wanted to bring that into the Levo chassis as well.
So what have we got here? A trail bike or an enduro bike? Or is it a downhill bike?
Take a step back and you're looking at a 160 front, 150 rear trail bike, which is it's going to appeal to a lot of trail riders. And then the details give you those lean-ins to the progression. That rider who wants a little bit more. You've got the shorter rear end because of the smaller wheel. And that's a conscious effort, not just to be cool and mulleting and isn't that fantastic. I mean, it genuinely rides differently to the old bike and in a way that it shouldn't really turn away existing 2.9er Levo riders. It's an S5, this one here. It's not the biggest, so our largest one is S6. That's got a reach on it of about 532 mils. It's longer than a week. It's so long. Yeah, it's really out there. And again, partly touching on no kicking up, shorter seat tube, long dropper. It's given us that option to say, well, it's no longer a height game. You know, you are significantly taller than I am, but at the same time, you could probably ride my S4. I could, you know, I could certainly stand over your S5. I might find the reach is a bit too much for me on a more aggressive trail, but to ride it up and down, no problem. The point with the S sizing is, without the standover consideration or thinking about seat tube height and therefore the overall length of the dropper, you can really dial in on rider preference. So the cockpit length, to an extent, you know, how you're going to have your weight bias with the front center as well. So our reach measurement, of course, is taken from center BB to center top of head tube. And that should really be the way we're all thinking about bikes, whether it's a road bike, a triathlon bike, and now, of course, mountain bikes. It's become more prevalent. We've taken those cues from Stump Jumper Evo. We have S sizing in Kinevo. It began its days on demo. And that's also where we talk about the progressiveness of the rear suspension. The axle path we now have on this bike versus the previous bike, it has progressed, quite literally. It has changed. We have given it a more rearward axle path. And that has literally transcended from our longest travel, most aggressive bikes. And because we've worked with the FSR system for so many years now, we are able to dial that in for the rider.
Just to talk about rearward axle path. So we're saying instead of going like straight up or, you know, kind of this way, it's actually heading out in an arc this way.
Exactly.
Is that what we're saying?
That's exactly it, yeah.
Why do you need that? What benefits does that bring, that rearward path?
A couple of things that you're going to get with this. First of all, by just being quite a sort of shallow rearward curve initially, you're going to get lots of nice small bump sensitivity. So you're almost like the slow speed as it were, when you're only using the first, 20% of the travel. We've got 150 mils here, so the first element of that, you're kind of sagged into it really, and you'll hit a few bumps and it'll be no problem whatsoever. As you start hitting the bigger stuff and maybe progressive multiple hits of the bigger stuff, too much of a straight up axle path, you could end up kind of blowing through more of your travel too quickly, or even hooking up and getting caught, the kind of steps downs and the roots and all the stuff that we're kind of used to riding in the UK. The way the FSR system works, and we can tune it so that it has a more rearward axle path, means it's not going to get hung up, means that mid-stroke, so I said the first 20% initially, and then you take like the middle third, I suppose, so another sort of maybe 30% or so, that will be able to cope with progressive stability. So it'll actually prop the rider up when they're really sort of diving into maybe a berm. They're not using all the travel, but they're using quite a lot of it, or you're getting sort of multiple hits, so it's not just going to pack down on you. And of course, right at the very end of the stroke, the last sort of 20% or so, that's where we need to make sure it's not going to bottom out, you're not going to damage the shock, you're not going to potentially damage the bike. So that end piece is nearly always there, but what we've really wanted to work on with the axle path is to get that mid-stroke area much more supportive for the progressive rider who is really pushing themselves.
So this Mastermind TCU, I mean, it looks so sweet. You've got it mounted neatly in the top tube, but what is like the real world benefits of having something like this?
We've always been a brand that's wanted to keep that kind of clean trail bike cockpit. Yes, we have a handlebar remote on there for changing modes, but we've never wanted to go big on the screen sort of deal, particularly on a mountain bike. Anything off-road, we've not wanted to do that. So the TCU position has always made sense. So we wanted to use what we already had and deliver the Mastermind TCU, which is of course it's an upgrade in terms of functionality. Same position, nice and tucked away on the top tube, it'll be really safe and robust like that. But with a nice backlit TFT screen, what you're going to get is as much or as little data as you want. So previously you had state of charge and which mode you're in. Works a treat, no problem with the LEDs. What we're getting now is you could have state of charge, pairing it to a heart rate monitor, you could have your heart rate on there, you could have power output, you can have speed, you can have time of day, or you could just have one thing, right? You could go big, you can have lots of data fields on multiple pages, or you can literally have just like, that's my countdown, that's my range estimator right there. If you're in turbo mode, I've got X amount of miles or kilometers, what your state of charge is, what more you need to do. It's the brains of the bike, right? The Mastermind, the TCU area has always been the brains of the bike. So it's where your phone will connect. It's where you'll be able to access all the features via mission control for your infinite tuning, smart control, of course. So if you've got a route planned, roughly the kind of duration or roughly the sort of distance and elevation, then you can get the whole thing dialed so you'll never run out of power. Your range anxiety is like, that's a thing of the past.
Such a simple thing, but just to have a battery percentage on there, it's a bit like your phone. You know exactly if there's 56%, exactly how much battery you've got remaining. And secondly, it's really easy to see the mode that you're in. It's color coded, so I can see it's blue, green, or like an orange color based on your mode. And almost at a glance down in your peripheral, you can see what mode you're in. That's right, and even within the different pages, there's always a highlight color. So even if it's just a little bar, it doesn't have to literally say turbo or trail or eco at the top of your screen. If you've got a data field that is state of charge, as you've just mentioned, and maybe time of day, one of the highlighted colors in there, blue, green, yellow, and you'll know which mode you're in. Again, as you say, it's a kind of a quick glance thing, and as you said, it's the same with our phones. With the notch on an iPhone, I'm always scrolling down, I'm always flicking it down to see the percentage, even though you can still see a bar. Sometimes you just want to see it in numbers as well. It reminds me a little bit of a smartwatch, how you can customize the look and the feel of it. Yeah, the whole user interface element and the way that this is getting smarter. I think the smart tech is definitely the way to consider the Mastermind, and with its connectivity to mission control. Now mission control can
do firmware updates for the bigger parts of the bike, it could also potentially in the future totally change what that screen looks like.
We buy bikes based on, how they ride and maybe how they look. And, we look at the colours and the aesthetics and the lines, and it's so clean and well built into the top tube.
The integration piece is of course key though for the entire bike, and that sort of element symbolises the way we've got a trail bike that has the integration of the turbo system. And a lot of brands talk about their big three, like the motor, the battery, and then the human machine interface. And for us, it's those three things plus mission control, plus that added element to tune your ride, to totally customize how the bike feels, how much power you're using, dealing with range anxiety, working with a heart rate monitor, all of these kinds of things. It's all connected. It's more than just a bike these days. There's so much more via the app, and then having this seamless looking design, which is the beauty of having a system that's built by us. We're not having to rely on the way another brand of motor or battery needs to be put into the bike and how it delivers power and how it uses the battery power. It's our design. We can tune the motor to use the certain amount of power consumption depending on the modes it's in, and of course how it wants to be delivered to the rider.
There has been a lot of work done. I can see it from plugging the battery in, the reliability of the system, and the work and effort that's been done to try and make it as reliable as possible. First off, let's start with the motor, because it's called a 2.2 motor. It's more about improving the reliability, so no real performance changes going from the 2.1 to the 2.2. There's a new belt design, it's slightly thicker, slightly different materials. And
It's a couple of elements, in as much as the 2.1 is very much associated with the previous generation bike. So the shape, the performance of it, as you say, so the dimensions, weight is the same, Newton meter output 90, same, peak power, nominal power, those things are consistent. The actual system has had a significant amount of updates throughout the life of the 2.1, but because many of them were running changes to deal with reliability, it still remained kind of the 2.1, and other than literally serial numbers, it would be very difficult to know which ones had what done to it. So we wanted to come out on the Gen 3 with a 2.2. Internally, it's very much the same. The belt being slightly thicker is something we've actually had on the most recent generation 2.1 motors. But we felt that with the new bike, it was right to give it the new name. But it's not belt, sprag clutch, bearing drift. Some of the features that were running changes on 2.1 are all in this motor. They were all in the model year 21 2.1 motors as well.
Got it. Battery, 700 watt hour battery. So in terms of the capacity, it's the same. It's the same battery as well, right? It's the same. Yeah. It's the same cells. There's no physical
same
difference.
Cells, same pack dimension and shape. So on a 700, I mean, this is the S Works. We've got the Pro as well, which is also going to be a 700. There's a slightly different internal packing bung on the inside of the frame, because the dimensions of the frame have changed slightly internally as well. So the expander that stops it from making a noise is a slightly different shape. And then of course our rock guard with the integrated door, which leads again directly into the idea of reliability. So those two things have changed. The physical battery pack and the cells used are the same.
Got it. Okay. So let's talk about this kind of water ingress thing, because I've seen and read, like many people, and maybe some people have experienced some issues with TCUs flashing and failing and water ingress, and it looks like super beefed up in terms of the seals that you've got in there. It reminds me a little bit more of like a kind of automotive style fitting rather than a small plug. So talk to me a bit about the work that's gone on there to try and protect that area of the bike.
Well, I'd say for us in the UK, this is probably like one of the most important things. I mean, the fact that the bike rides incredibly, and what you can do on it and how much more adjustment you have, it is of course amazing. But at the same time, we want to know that it's going to work. So there's a few things that we've really gone to town on. What we've got here is a quarter turn lever. Literally turn it the quarter turn, opens the door. Now this is where you start to see some of the changes here. So where it's compressed against the Rosenberger head, we're keeping out a huge amount of weather at this point. And then partly because this is such a nice sealed fit in here now, the sort of compressed by the hatch, we've got a ring pull that comes down on the plug head. And you pretty much, you have to have this ring pull. You have to use it to pull it out now, because the fit, I don't know if you heard that then, it's almost like a vacuum seal. The fit on this guy is incredible. And one of the other things I'll just show you as I'm rotating it round there either way is the main harness. So this cable here is massively flexible. So you've kind of got a seal here, double seal here, then actually around this area there's a further seal which interacts with this part of the hatch. So when you push the whole thing in, lock it down, this is magnetic, that acts as a bit of extra compression. The whole thing is kind of squeezing in on itself, keeping the contacts fully engaged, and then these seals themselves are treated with a product called Nyogel, which is a grease, which is again adding to that weatherproofing element.
Before we wrap up, I have noticed it's not until you get up close and personal with the bike you can see, these kind of nuances, and the level of detail looks fantastic. Just little things like the recessed carbon for the bottle cage. You can fit a bottle in because you've got this.
The Resi shock.
Piggyback shock.
There's less space.
Yeah, small details like this kind of stuff around here. This plastic trim to stop the chips in the paintwork. This kind of, I don't know what you'd call this rubber kind of gasket area just down there, and it just looks like there's a lot of attention to detail in the fit and the finish of the frame, and the paintwork looks great as well.
It's all about that if you can have lots of little details to go together to make them kind of greater than the sum of its parts, the whole package feels premium. It will ride beautifully and feel like it's capable of going and then going again and then going again, and it's not going to let you down as a result.
Mate, thank you so much for coming in and talking about the bike. What's next? So, any little snippets you can share, like lightweight Kenevo, anything like that?
Yeah, lips are sealed, my man.
I get it out of you, I'm sure. If you like this kind of tech talk, let me know in the comments. And if there is a bike that you bring out in the future, maybe we could do something like this again. So,
absolutely, I'd love to, mate. This has been fantastic. Thank you.
Amazing. Cheers, dude.
Peace.